Emma Cole thought she had married the man of her dreams. But just 4 days into their Bora Bora honeymoon, her lifeless body was pulled from the lagoon, and Ryan Matthews, her husband and a decorated police officer, became the prime suspect in a murder that shocked the world. Emma Cole had always believed in fairy tales. Growing up in a small Oregon town, she imagined the kind of love that lived in books and movies. Gentle, protective, full of adventure. When she met Ryan Matthews at a local charity fundraiser, it felt like fate. He was a decorated police officer from Portland, confident but kind, with a warm smile and a commanding presence that instantly drew people in. Their connection was immediate, and from their first conversation, Emma was convinced she had found the one. Their romance moved quickly. Ryan sent her good morning texts, surprised her at work with flowers, and drove hours just to have dinner together on her bad days. To her friends and family it seemed like a perfect match. He was strong, stable, and respectful, exactly the kind of man Emma had always hoped to marry. They got engaged after just 10 months of dating. Ryan proposed under a cascade of fairy lights during a weekend trip to a mountain cabin. Emma said yes through tears, already picturing their future home, children, and quiet life together. Their wedding was elegant and joyful, held in a rustic vineyard with Emma wearing her grandmother's lace veil. Ryan looked proud and content as he kissed his bride, surrounded by cheers and clinking glasses. The couple chose Bora Bora for their honeymoon, a dream destination Emma had always wanted to visit. Turquoise waters, overwater bungalows, and warm island breezes promised a romantic escape from the world. Emma couldn't stop smiling in the airport photos. It felt like the beginning of something magical. Their first few days on the island were everything they hoped for. They went snorkeling, drank cocktails out of coconuts, and held hands as they walked barefoot along the beach at sunset. Emma posted updates regularly, sun-drenched selfies, pictures of colorful fish, and a video of Ryan pretending to dance on the sand. Her captions were full of hearts and hashtags like Faye Honeymoonbliss and Faye Married Life. Friends commented that she looked happier than ever. But behind the smiles, there were small cracks no one noticed. Emma texted a friend on their second night, saying Ryan had been weirdly quiet and short-tempered when she misplaced the room key. She brushed it off, saying it was probably just jet lag. On another occasion, a couple staying in the next bungalow heard loud arguing late into the night, but didn't report it, thinking it was just a typical lover's disagreement. On the fourth morning, Emma didn't show up for the breakfast they had scheduled at the main pavilion. Resort staff thought it was strange. Emma had been friendly and chatty, always smiling and full of life. Housekeeping was sent to check their villa. The door was unlocked, the room empty, and breakfast untouched. Then, they noticed the sliding glass door to the deck was open, the curtains fluttering slightly in the breeze. Moments later, one of the staff spotted her body floating face, down in the clear, shallow water beneath the villa. There was silence, then screams. It didn't take long for security and police to arrive. Ryan appeared minutes later, barefoot, drenched, and looking dazed. He told officers Emma must have slipped during the night, that she had gotten up to use the bathroom or admire the view, and maybe lost her balance. He claimed he hadn't even realized she was missing until someone knocked. But the scene didn't feel like an accident, and as investigators began to examine the details more closely, what was supposed to be a celebration of new beginnings began to unravel into something dark, chilling, and irreversible. Emma's body was pulled from the shallow water by resort staff before the local authorities arrived. Her skin was pale, her nightgown clinging to her as though trying to hold on to life that had already slipped away. The scene was disturbing in a place so tranquil. Tropical birds chirped nearby. The waves lapped softly against the wooden pillars, and tourists in the distance lounged in ignorance of the unfolding tragedy. Paramedics attempted CPR, but it was already too late. Emma Cole, just 4 days into her honeymoon, was declared dead on the deck of the same villa where she had celebrated her marriage only nights before. Ryan Matthews sat nearby, wrapped in a hotel towel, staring blankly at the horizon. His story to authorities was simple. He said he had woken up and found the bed empty. When he checked the deck, Emma wasn't there. Assuming she had gone for a walk or to get coffee, he returned to bed. He claimed he didn't hear anything unusual during the night, and that he had been in a deep sleep from the moment they went to bed. It was all a terrible accident, he repeated, voice flat and detached. But investigators were immediately skeptical. There were subtle but telling details that didn't align with an accidental fall. The injuries on Emma's body were not consistent with merely hitting her head. She had bruises around her wrists and upper arms, bruises that looked more like fingerprints than the result of a stumble. There were scratches on her neck and broken skin on her lower lip. Her fingernails had been chipped and cracked, signs she may have fought back. The water where she was found was only a few feet deep. It would have been difficult to drown there unless unconscious or restrained. The medical examiner in Bora Bora performed a preliminary autopsy and confirmed the suspicion of foul play. Though Emma's lungs contained water, suggesting she was alive when she entered the water, there were signs of blunt force trauma to the back of her head and bruising consistent with manual strangulation. The combination of injuries painted a disturbing picture. It was unlikely she had simply fallen. Someone had harmed her. Resort security began reviewing footage from cameras positioned near the walkways and public areas. Though the villas themselves didn't have direct surveillance, a nearby bungalow caught a faint silhouette in the early hours of the morning. It showed a figure, believed to be Ryan, dragging something heavy across the deck just after 2 a.m. There was no sign of Emma walking on her own. The time of the footage directly contradicted Ryan's claim that he hadn't noticed anything until after sunrise. Hotel staff who interacted with the couple recalled small moments of tension. On their first night, Ryan had seemed irritated when Emma lingered too long speaking with another tourist at dinner. A bartender noted that Ryan had become noticeably cold after having a few drinks, barely responding to Emma's attempts to engage him. None of these moments seemed alarming at the time, just typical marital disagreements. But in the context of her sudden death, they became fragments of a larger, more sinister puzzle. Back in the villa, investigators found an overturned glass on the bedside table. Its contents spilled and dried on the hardwood floor. There were scratches on the frame of the sliding door and a torn strap from Emma's nightgown near the pool ladder. These weren't the traces of a woman who had wandered outside to admire the view. These were the remnants of a struggle. Within 48 hours, the local police labeled the death suspicious. Ryan Matthews, once seen as a grieving husband, was no longer just a witness. He was now the prime suspect in a death that would shake everyone who had once envied their picture-perfect life. As the investigation moved forward, every detail of Emma and Ryan's relationship came under intense scrutiny. Detectives in Bora Bora worked with American authorities to piece together the days leading up to her death, while forensic specialists continued to analyze evidence from the villa. At the same time, Emma's family back home was beginning to learn unsettling truths they hadn't known, or perhaps had chosen to ignore. Emma's sister, Claire, provided emails and voice messages Emma had sent weeks before the wedding. They revealed quiet fears hidden behind her joyful social media posts. In one message, Emma mentioned that Ryan had become unpredictable. He checked her phone often, questioned where she was going, and once showed up unannounced to her school during a faculty meeting. She never said he hit her. She made excuses, saying he was just protective or stressed. But the undercurrent of unease was unmistakable. Emma had cold feet about the marriage, but felt it was too late to back out. Investigators also discovered that just 2 weeks before the wedding, Ryan had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Emma. The amount was staggering, $500,000, with Ryan listed as the sole beneficiary. Emma's family was stunned. She had never mentioned it. She had no history of serious health issues and certainly didn't plan for anything to go wrong. The timing of the policy raised red flags. Why would someone so young and healthy need such coverage days before saying, "I do"? More questions emerged as forensic teams processed Ryan's electronics. His phone showed deleted searches for methods of drowning that leave minimal bruising, causes of death that mimic accidental slips, and even a forum thread on how water can erase evidence of a crime. His laptop revealed even more disturbing activity. Multiple visits to sites that discuss staging accidental deaths, particularly in remote or exotic locations. Investigators contacted the insurance company. The agent who sold Ryan the policy remembered the meeting clearly. Ryan had come alone and was insistent about getting the paperwork done quickly. He claimed Emma was too busy with wedding planning to come in. When asked if she was aware of the policy, Ryan reportedly smiled and said she was bored with everything. The agent now admitted it felt odd at the time, but not enough to raise an alarm. Meanwhile, police found Ryan's behavior increasingly suspicious. He had refused a second interview without legal representation, and his statements were starting to contradict each other. Initially, he claimed Emma went out to the deck after midnight, and he never saw her again. But later, he mentioned waking up when she left the bed, then again denied it during another questioning. When asked why he didn't alert staff when he couldn't find his wife in the morning, he said he assumed she went swimming, though there was no swimsuit or towel missing from the room. Back at the villa, forensic experts located a small blood stain near the edge of the deck, just below where Emma's body was found. Traces of blood were also identified on one of the lounge chair cushions, faint but undeniable. DNA results later confirmed the blood belonged to Emma. The location and spread suggested she had been injured before she entered the water. The case had transformed from a tragic accident into a cold, calculated plan. Every discovery pulled the image of Ryan as a grieving husband further apart, revealing something far more chilling. He wasn't mourning. He was covering up. The evidence didn't just point toward guilt, it outlined a timeline, a motive, a method, and a man willing to kill the woman he had just married. As the case against Ryan Matthews deepened, investigators started to peel away the carefully constructed image he had spent years perfecting. On paper, Ryan had an impeccable record, no criminal charges, consistent employment as a police officer, and glowing performance evaluations. But behind that polished resume lay a troubling history that had been quietly buried by bureaucracy and silence. The Internal Affairs Department at his police precinct released previously undisclosed files. 3 years before Emma's death, Ryan had been the subject of 2 internal investigations. The first involved an excessive force complaint from a suspect who claimed Ryan had slammed his head into a squad car during an arrest. The second came from a fellow officer who alleged Ryan had a temper and often acted aggressively toward civilians during routine traffic stops. Both cases were dropped due to insufficient evidence, and no disciplinary action was taken. The complaints never reached public records, and Ryan faced no long-term consequences. He remained in uniform, his record officially clean. Further inquiry uncovered a troubling relationship with a former girlfriend, Megan Allen. She contacted authorities after learning of Emma's death and said she felt compelled to speak out. Megan claimed that during their 2-year relationship, Ryan had isolated her from friends and family, monitored her phone, and once locked her in their apartment during an argument. She had never reported him, fearing no one would believe her over a respected officer. Her story mirrored Emma's experience in subtle but significant ways: patterns of control, emotional manipulation, and concealed rage behind closed doors. The prosecution gathered statements from multiple acquaintances who described Ryan as controlling and unpredictable in private. A former coworker recalled a moment when Ryan became furious after his girlfriend didn't answer a text quickly enough. Another mentioned that Ryan had once said, half-jokingly, that if a woman ever crossed him, she'd regret it. At the time, people laughed it off. Now, no one was laughing. The forensic evidence from the crime scene continued to paint a damning picture. Forensic experts confirmed that Emma's bruises were inflicted while she was still alive. The pattern of injuries on her neck, arms, and back were consistent with manual restraint. The blow to her head had been powerful, likely causing disorientation or unconsciousness. The conclusion was that she had been assaulted before being placed, or thrown, into the water. It was not an accident, it was homicide. Autopsy reports also revealed water in her lungs, indicating that Emma had been alive, though barely, when she entered the water. It was the drowning that ultimately caused her death, not the blow to the head. This detail shattered Ryan's defense that she had slipped and hit her head, dying instantly. The evidence proved she had been injured, incapacitated, and then left to die in the very lagoon they had traveled across the world to enjoy. Emma's family, still reeling from grief, traveled to Bora to bring her body home. The once joyful wedding photos were now evidence. Her smiling face, once filled with hope, had become a symbol of how quickly love can turn to terror. The couple's wedding video, which had captured the audience's hearts only weeks earlier, was now played in court to contrast the life Emma was promised with the fate she had suffered. With mounting evidence, Bora authorities formally charged Ryan with first-degree murder. He was arrested at his hotel under heavy security and placed in local custody. The man who had once been seen as a hero was now shackled, awaiting extradition while investigators prepared the case for trial. The island, once a paradise, had become the setting for a chilling betrayal. The truth about Ryan Matthews was now fully exposed, and it was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. The trial of Ryan Matthews became an international media sensation. News outlets around the world covered every detail, from courtroom sketches to headlines branding him the honeymoon killer. What began as a tragic story of a newlywed's untimely death had transformed into a gripping true crime case that captivated, horrified the public. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. Television specials dissected evidence. Social media buzzed with theories. But inside the courtroom, the facts were cold, methodical, and damning. Prosecutors presented their case with brutal clarity. They laid out a timeline showing that Emma had likely been attacked shortly after midnight on the fourth day of their honeymoon. A forensic pathologist confirmed that her injuries could not have been caused by an accidental fall. Experts testified that bruises on her neck and wrists were consistent with someone being held down. Her broken fingernails, the chipped enamel on her front tooth, and the bruising on her ribs told a silent story of a desperate struggle. The key piece of evidence came from the resort's security system. Though the villa had no direct surveillance, a nearby camera recorded blurry but telling footage. A figure matching Ryan's build could be seen dragging something heavy onto the deck at 2:07 a.m. While the video was grainy and distant, it aligned perfectly with the time forensic experts estimated Emma sustained her fatal injuries. The defense tried to argue that the figure could not be conclusively identified as Ryan, but the timing, the body language, and the location told a story that was hard to ignore. Further crushing to Ryan's defense was the testimony from Emma's family and friends. Her sister spoke of late night calls where Emma expressed anxiety about Ryan's temper. Her best friend described how Emma had seemed nervous the week before the wedding, but didn't want to disappoint anyone. The courtroom was silent as a tearful voice recording was played, Emma leaving a voicemail for her mother 2 days before flying to Bora, saying, "I really hope I'm doing the right thing." The life insurance policy sealed the prosecution's case. It was clear and deliberate. The 500,000 policy had been initiated and finalized by Ryan alone. Emma had not signed any paperwork or been involved in the process. A representative from the insurance company confirmed that Ryan pushed for a quick approval, citing the upcoming wedding and honeymoon. It became evident that Emma's death had not been a spur-of-the-moment act of rage. It had been premeditated. Ryan's defense tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial and that Emma's death, though tragic, was an accident. They claimed the bruises could have occurred during a fall or from underwater contact with the villa structure. They painted Ryan as a man in shock, overwhelmed by the horror of losing his new wife. But his emotionless 9/11 call, contradictory statements, and lack of credible explanation for his actions that night made the argument impossible to believe. After just 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. Ryan Matthews was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no visible reaction as the sentence was read. Emma's family, who had traveled from Oregon to attend every day of the trial, embraced one another as tears streamed down their faces. Justice had been served, but the loss remained unbearable. Emma had believed in love, in building a life with someone she trusted. Instead, she was betrayed, abused, and killed by the very person who vowed to protect her. The story of Emma Cole's murder would be told and retold for years to come, not only as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder of how easily appearances can deceive. What looked like a fairy tale honeymoon ended in calculated cruelty. And the man who wore a badge to protect others had become the villain in a case that no one would ever forget.